Finance, City Council Finance Committee, and Council as whole is out of recess. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Stacy, can you take a roll call, please?
Councilman Gary Donovan.
Councilman Gary Donovan present.
Councilwoman Colleen O'Connor.
Council at large here.
Councilwoman Bridget Hosky.
Councilwoman Bridget Hosky, First District, present.
Councilman William X. Conlon.
Councilman William X. Conlon, Second District, present.
Councilwoman Liz Johnston.
Councilwoman Liz Johnston, District 3, present.
Mitchell Garagnano.
Councilman Mitchell Galagnano, 4th District, present.
Councilwoman Robin Hamilton.
Councilwoman Robin Hamilton, 5th District, here.
Councilman Peter Massaro.
Councilman Peter Massaro, President, 6th District.
Councilman Trinae McGee.
Councilwoman Trinae McGee, 7th District, present.
Councilwoman Crystal Finelli.
Councilwoman Crystal Finelli, 8th District, present.
Councilman Robert Bruno.
Councilman Robert Bruno, 9th, present.
Councilman Barry Lee Cohen.
Councilman Barry Lee Cohen, 10th District, present.
And Chairman Rod Quagliani.
Ron Quagliani, Council at Large, present.
Okay, so tonight we have before us planning and development. Fred, and I see David is here as well. So usually the way we handle these is that you can give a presentation, talk about whatever you would like, and then after you're completed, the council members will ask you their questions. We do limit it to 2 questions per council person until we go around, and then they'll have a shot to ask any follow-up questions once everyone's had a chance. We do ask that when the council member is asking you a question that you just stay muted, and when you come on, they will mute themselves, and we've come to realize that that just helps with the backbeat going back and forth. So with that said, Fred or David, you have the floor. You're muted, Fred.
Sorry about that. I also wanted to let you know the building official, Frank Gladwin, is also on the call. Being that we ran late tonight, I just wanted to let you know I appreciate the time to be in front of you. My budget is pretty much cut and dry, as you probably looked at it. So I'm going to just defer to any questions that the council has for us, and depending on what the question specifically is, one of us will answer it and do our best for you.
Thank you. Do any council members have any questions for Fred or his department? Councilman Bruno, did you have your hand up, I think?
Yeah, I did. I just had one question, if you don't mind, Bridget. Mr. Massaro there, the grant writer and the grant coordinator. A lot of feedback. You there? Okay. So the grant writer and the grant coordinator, if you look at that position for year 20 and then you look at it for year 21, it went from 66,521 to 75,075. Can you explain that to us, please? What's the big jump? Is that a raise that somebody received? What's that jump from 20 to 21?
I'd like to defer that, if I may, to either the mayor or to to the mayor if possible.
Yes. There's an awful lot of echoing now this time around.
Fred,
Eddie?
excuse me, yeah, Councilman Bruno, can you mute yourself while they answer, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So what happened was we had a person as the grant writer and not the grant administrator. It's still like echoing. It was fine the first meeting. Let me sit back. Maybe
Can you give me a moment? Leslie M is still on, but she's not muted. Can you mute her, Chairman?
no,
Maybe that's where it's cut. You can't mute her?
because it's echoing.
Can you text her and let her know that she's still attached to the call, Mayor?
I'll text her for you.
Thank you. So basically, it's a different, it's a different position with more responsibilities, and that's why there's an increase in pay. We're looking to get rid of the grants writer position and have the more encompassing position that will give us more grants and more information.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So basically, it's the same person doing the same job, except it's more responsibility.
It may end up being the same person. I won't know until July the 1st when you know, bidding, and because you have to post all these jobs and see who ends up, you know, the winner. It may very well be the same person.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mayor. Can I ask my second question now while I'm here?
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you so much. Mr. Masori, are you still here? Fred, you still here?
I am.
Thank you, sir. So, did we add 2 new positions to the building department? I was looking at that. It looks like we added 2 positions to that.
I'm going to defer that to Frank Gladwin, but we did not. It's just one position.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. This is new to me, so I apologize. Am I coming up on anybody's screen?
No, you're not.
No, we can hear you, Frank. We just can't see you.
All right, that's fine. Yes, in regards to the approved budget by the mayor, what we've done is we currently have a staff of 3 assistant building officials. The mayor's approved budget would have 2 additional assistant building officials. And in the position of our property maintenance inspector / zoning enforcement officer, there would be 1 position. So if you move according to Commissioner Masori, if you moved around the numbers that we currently have, you would find it would be an add of 1 position. That's correct. And I'm not sure if I'm able to hear you folks now. Is anybody talking right now?
Yeah, you're good, Frank. We hear you.
All right. Thank you, sir. And one of the reasons, Councilman, one of the reasons is the fact that we're looking to be more efficient when we send out a property maintenance inspector who would identify an issue. It could be a building that was decaying and issues of that sort. So our current position would be that PMI would identify the problem. He would then bring that back to the building department, and the assistant building official would take the necessary action. The thought here is to have our ABO, who would be out in the field. He would recognize the legal code issues, and what he will do then is take more stern action, quicker action. That's the thought pattern behind that. Having the 1 PMI / CEO, he would be, you can almost say, a scout. He or she would be out there identifying those areas of problems. Some of them may fall into the easy response. The grass cutting, for example, was a big one during the summer. He or she would be able to address that. but that person would also be responsible to enforce certain zoning enforcement laws. So we found that to be a win situation as well. I hope that answers.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. They'll also be handling blight.
Yeah, blight's capital B. I mean, that's a big issue, and it covers an awful lot of things. One of our goals on the building department side, and supported by this administration, is that our new ABOs would actually be almost doing a dual practice. They will be doing enforcement of the PMI, which we could put blight under that, and he or she would also be enforcing the state building code. So in my view, it's you're getting a better bang for your buck, and I think it's a good move if we go that route.
Thank you very much. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I may just also state, which is imperative, Frank Gladwin right now is speaking from Florida. He's done a great job for the city for several years. He is prepared to retire, and he's going to be a tremendous loss when he does do that to the city. So we're preparing for the next phase for the building department with this position. Quite honest with you, when we do lose Frank, and he does ultimately retire, and he's been, asked to stay on an additional 2 years since I've been hired as commissioner, and we're grateful that he has added 2 years to the department. But I would need, for his knowledge, to filled 2 positions probably would not even cover what this man has in his head to cover what he does for the city. So it's going to be a tremendous void when he does leave. So I just want you to understand what we're trying to prepare in this department when the time does come, and it's going to be coming very soon. So we need to be ready for this.
Thank you, Fred, for that. Does any of the other council members have any questions? Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Councilwoman Houski. I understand, Fred, that you have to have, and wisely so, a succession plan given the retirement of a very important individual. But, I looked through the budget, and my first 2 questions, to give everyone else a chance, because I do have a couple of questions here, is when I looked at the grants coordinator and I looked at the bottom line, an additional building official, zoning enforcement, if you will, I'm looking at this in terms of return on investment, okay? And when you did your planning for this, I'm sure that there were opportunities perhaps in the past year that we weren't able to seize, maybe because we didn't have the manpower or the skill level or what have you. And so what I'd like to find out from you, and I'm not asking you a hard number here, but some estimate. In terms of the grants coordinator, we're going to have somebody, we're paying a little bit more money for to get somebody qualified, because I recall in the past, Frank had mentioned at a prior council meeting that we just couldn't get anyone at the lower position that was willing to stay. We just weren't paying enough money, so we hired a grants coordinator, made him a little more responsibility, more position. But my question is now that we have this guy or gal that will be hired to come in to write the grants, be dedicated there, being there full time, is there any type of projection that you might say that we're going to get X number of dollars more into the city coffers because we're going to have an opportunity to write so many more grants the next fiscal year, and we have so many more grants, given our experience in the past when we had someone there? How much money we're going to make? In other words, I look at this as maybe I'm wrong, but I'm convinced that a grants coordinator, in essence, is a revenue generating job because he's going to bring in the bucks to help the city. Can you give me some idea, a range of what the grants coordinator might be bringing in? It might be a little unfair question, but I think it's important to get a handle on this.
I'd like to possibly defer this to Frank, because the grants writer now Just so you understand, the logistics falls more under the finance department than under my purview. I do know since this temporary position has been filled by the current body that is there now, they've been actively working with the various public service departments and has been doing a tremendous job in seizing the opportunities for various grants. And I'll leave that to Frank to answer that better for more directive.
Frank, I would appreciate any type of number estimate on this, though, if you could.
I could try to find you the numbers. I could.
Excuse me one second. Can we please mute ourselves when the other person starts to speak? There's a lot of backbeat.
I could go back and try to find all of the information, but it is in excess of $10 million that the grants writer has filled in for us in the past. This is all the LoCIP activity. It's everything that interacts with the states and other organizations to try to go out and find grants. The individual that's currently there now has just completed filling out a grant application for Allentown Fire for assistance with, I believe it's a new vehicle.
Just so I'm clear here, I don't mean to interrupt you, Frank, but just so I'm clear, you're saying is that 10 million, that we can expect the grants writer to write out about $10 million of grants, or the money that might be brought in versus past years? Like in past years, has the grant writer been able to bring it in to $10 million, or they haven't only been able to bring in $8 million because we haven't had somebody to do it? I'm trying to get a, I'm trying to see how
I'd have to go back through the data to actually find a number I could hang my hat on. I will tell you that because we did not have a grants writer in the first half of the year, we did miss out on several $100,000 related to a DOJ grant.
But, you know, I would appreciate if you could come back to the council with some, given if we had a grant writer the full year and so forth. I know that this was an outlier this past year because we had the position kind of like not filled, but I'd like to know, you know, what are we talking about? You know, realistically, you know, what are we talking about from it? Because I'm looking this once again as an income generating, bringing in money to the city. This is a very important position as long as we know that, you know, if we're going to pay the extra money to go the coordinator position, that we're going to get that extra differential in. So that was my first question, because I know you can't give me a number tonight, but I'm really interested in getting a number, getting an estimate, and I'd appreciate that. My second question is also tied, and again, I don't know if this is you, Fred, or this is you, Frank, so I'm going to toss this up as my second question, is we have a new, we're adding on in essence, and I understand the rationale why, because it's been explained in the past about an additional enforcement officer, an additional building official. They would have more, I would say more responsibility and more authority to do things versus a general blight officer in the past. They can do blight and they can do other activities, which is also important. I understand that. But if we were just to take, and maybe this is too myopic, but I'm going to say it anyway. Right now, in the past, we've had really one blight officer, and that blight officer has been able to, I hate to say this, issue tickets, fees, whatever. And that in itself is we are getting income from those tickets and fees or whatever because someone has left a mess outside, or quite honestly, that blight officer, one person is not enough for the town. So there's been lots of, I hate to say this, lots of opportunity for income, but one guy can't do it all. So my question basically is very similar. Here we have a second person, thank goodness, which I'm for, I'll tell you that, I'm for, I understand it, that is going to be able to help with the blight in the city for a better quality of life, be able to also help with the other responsibilities in the job description. What type of income, if we should go look at just the one blight officer that we currently had, how much income in fees did he bring in the last fiscal year? And would it be fair to say that we can double that number? Just trying to look at it from return on investment only. Can you give me some idea of what he or she brought in and what we can look at next year?
It might be difficult. Frank, I'll try to answer, Frank Lavin, I'll try to answer that first, and then maybe you can also comment. It might be difficult to give you a dollar amount because the fees that are the tickets, as you pointed out, those are issued by the police department, the CRO, the community resource officers who we work hand in hand with. We don't see those, and those fines are levied by the police commission. And maybe you may have the police budget that has a separate line item, or the finance director could tell you. I don't see those numbers, so it's very
According to the ledger, it's been roughly $30,000 in the past 2 years.
That they've issued, I know the police issue the tickets, but they do the reporting, if you will. You know what I'm saying? They do the inspection, they identify that there's a problem. And what you're saying, Frank, is that officer last year basically might have been responsible for like about $30,000. Is that correct?
There's a line item in the revenue under fines and penalties called building code violations.
Okay, I'll check.
In the past, they have not been using that line correctly because it doesn't appear until 2018. But it was $32,000 in 18 and $26,000 in 19.
Okay, so conceivably we might make another, I mean, I'm crystal balling it. We can make another $30,000, just being arbitrary here. Okay, I appreciate that. And those are my two questions for now. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Councilman Massaro?
Yes, I got one question here. Thank you, Madam Chair. Fred, as far as planning and zoning goes, your IT part of it, is it up to date as far as, you know? Because I was under the understanding that you're a little bit behind in your IT programs. Is this true?
Well, thank you for the question, Councilman Massaro and Chief. We do have a shortfall on certain IT matters. I'll let Frank, our building official, mention where that falls within. But I think it's more of a global area where maybe David Richards would have to, our IT person, talk about, and that's more of a server issue. But Frank, could you maybe talk a little bit about the program?
Sure. Councilman Massaro, yes, we currently have what they call Humphrey Program. It's our construction management, and that's the one you might be referring to. It is outdated and it needs to be ramped up. We have been in conversation with IT, our man there, Dave Richards, and we have not taken the next step forward as to where we're going with it, to be quite honestly. We've discussed different items and generating some kind of revenue to pay for that. So it's in the works. I do not have a clear answer for you. That will be kicking, that will start something new next week. But we are aware that our construction management system needs to be updated. That's the best I can tell you at this moment.
So you answered part of the question is there any way you can raise some fees to just earmark that to upgrade your IT program?
We have looked at some creative ways, Chief, and a lot of ideas, but we haven't put anything forward to do that. But there's a lot of ideas around to do exactly what you're saying. I should be back next month in May. On my agenda, on my calendar, Dave Richards will be one of my first stops to start that program going, but and in concert with our commissioner as well.
And if I may say, I know a lot of you are new council members, but for the ones that have been on since I've been hired, and I came back in and mentioned about some of the hardware that was outdated for our staff, and you gave me the authority to try to work with our IT. I was successful in getting new laptops for our team members. So in terms of the hardware, we were successful in getting everybody up to date hardware. So I could gladly say that we are up to snuff with modern items for when they go out on the field. So that is very helpful. So thank you for the support in the past, and I appreciate the help of the IT department and providing those devices so that my team could be as effective as possible and efficient as possible on the road. So also, if I know somebody mentioned fees, and I'm sure Councilwoman Hosky, if I've seen the other department head meetings, maybe it's a good time to segue into that before you ask the question. Our department did a very extensive view, both on the building side, but also on the planning and zoning side of all our fees to see how we looked at compared to other communities, to see if there was any opportunity to gain or increase our fees. We worked with Mike Malone, and I'll pass David, I know who's been sitting quietly, Dave Colleen, to talk a little bit about our zoning department, and then I'll also then pass it along to Frank to discuss our building side. But just so you know, our department last fall did an extensive review of both sides of the departments in terms of our fee structures. And I think we'll give you a good update on where we stand with that, and maybe if there's any opportunities. So Dave, if you could possibly give a quick update on that, I'd appreciate it on the planning and zoning side.
Sure, I can. Thank you, Fred. So late in the fall, we did meet with Mike Malone, our representative or liaison with the MARB board, and he and I looked at a study we had completed comparing West Haven to at least 5 or 6 other communities in the area that we thought were comparable size. East Haven, Fairfield, Hamden, New Haven, Milford, Stratford. And what we found is that our pricing for most of our applications was actually comparable and in many cases higher than most of the surrounding communities. So we didn't feel it was possible to increase any of the specific fees for zoning permits, site plan review, special permits, approval of vehicle locations, subdivision fees, variances for ZBA, or appeals of ZBA zoning enforcement officer decision. But we did find that looking back to the 2012 fees that were approved by the council, there was one fee that we could interpret flexibly. And so what we did do effective January 1 is start to charge a fee for renewals of liquor permits, for jewelry permit or metal, precious metal licensing with the state, and food trucks, increasing those fees. And last year, the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted a broader outdoor dining regulation, which does permit us also to charge a fee to restaurants for that as well. So those are the things we found immediately. Recently, we've also felt that there might be opportunities to increase inland wetland fees. And we want to go back and look at the fees we're charging for amendments to zoning regulations and zoning changes. Basically where we're at.
And also, we get a large amount of inquiries on certificate of compliance that Dave does a tremendous job in responding. That's when a property is being transferred at a closing. We get a request the lenders usually want to confirm that a property is conforming to zoning. And there's an $100 fee for that. It's actually been a pretty good income source for the department and for the city, which obviously we do not reap the benefits, meaning our department does not retain that income. It goes to the general fund. But I think, up to this year, Dave, What is the amount?
I'd say we've probably brought in maybe about 2,500 or 3,000 in the year so far.
So I know it doesn't sound like much for the numbers that you guys were all mentioning earlier, which is astounding, but I'm just saying it's an additional at the end of the year, anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 that we weren't planning on incorporating, which is nice. So. And Frank, could you just talk a little bit on the building side, Frank? Frank Gladwin, are you still there?
Can you hear me? Hello?
You're good, Frank. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Yes, Fred, I just want to share the council, historically, just to let you know, the building department, our permit fees for decades, going back to the 90s and late 80s, we've always been in the black. So the cost to run our department, which is over 500,000, our permit fees have paid for our staff. So that's always good news, and also for the parts that go with our staff, the paper goods, etc. What I did speak also with Mr. Malone some time ago, and what we did this time around is we looked at where most of our type of building permit fees come in and the scope of work that comes in. So what we did is we went from our across the board $20 per 1,000, or every 1,000, or fraction of 1,000, you'd have to pay $20. So if you had a $10,000 job, 10 times 20 would be $200 would be the permit fee. So the change that we've made, the first 1,000 would be $30. And then after that, and this is also tied in with looking at other communities that are similar to ours. And then after that, you would go back to the $20 per 1,000, up to 500,000. Over 500,000, the cost of the job would then be $25 for every $1,000 after that. So you may look at it as a small step, but when you look at the amount of roof work is taking place, roof replacements, you look at the solar installations, we have a high percentage of those. That additional $10 does add up quickly. I'm at a disadvantage to pull out some of, where I am now, to pull out some of our information as to the amount of money we've made this past year with that. But I would certainly see an increase of our revenue coming in. But again, I want to assure you that our department, the building department, City of West Haven's building department, we have been in the black, always contributing additional money into the general fund. In fact, I think it was maybe 2 months ago or a little bit more, we were actually, we met our budget, believe it or not, through the permit fee process. Any questions on that?
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Frank. Do we have any, well, actually, I have a question. Can I ask you something, Frank, just to follow up with what you were saying? So the permit fees, one of the things that I've noticed is that, and I've called or reached out to your department to advise that on the weekends, you see the roofers, is that the right term, come in and do a whole roof in the weekend, and then they're gone. And me being who I am, take a picture of it, and I will send it to you guys. What happens? Like, what are we able to do? Are we able to go back and do they have to? Of course, I'm sure they have to do the fee, but is there other penalties that we can assess to them to make it more of a deterrent from doing it? I mean, do their licenses, do they get is there a point system? Kind of like if you get into a car accident, it's your license if you do things like that?
Sure. In the past, Councilwoman, what I put into our building code, the city code of West Haven, was that those fees would be doubled. And we were raising additional revenue because of that. I was contacted by the state of Connecticut, and very firmly informed that I had no right to do that, and I would have to follow the procedure by law. I'd have to go through the court system. And my history, anyways, going through the court system, it's time consuming, and the return on one's investment of time isn't always very good. So to answer your question, someone does that roof job, we get informed, our guy will go out there, put a stop work order on it. What we're going to start instituting is the guy doesn't get the permit to continue with that job until we go out and do a pre-permit inspection. And we will be charging for a fee for that. Now, that fee would be, it's not in our city of West Haven code at the moment, but our fee would be adjusted to the building official, who's myself, my hourly rates for our inspector to go out there just to see the scope of work he's done. So when he comes in to eventually take out his permit, he will have to pay for the services to the pre-permit inspection. So right now, that's what we're doing. We do have, by law, we could contact Consumer Protection. We would inform them that there's a bad guy out there. We give them their information. They run with it. They're taxed with their overload with their work. What happens with that individual, I don't know the answer to that. But we'll send it up to DCP. And when the guy comes in next time, we do the father and son talk, a little bit of scolding, bring him in the back room. We don't beat him up, but we certainly make it that they're aware that we're not going to put up with this. But people do exactly what you said. Still at the night or on the weekends, they do that kind of work, yes.
Just one more. I'm sorry? Oh, just one. Is there, what if they're gone and you don't know who the company was that did the work? Is there any type of consequence for the landlord or the owner of the home or building?
Sure. At the end of the day, the way the laws are in the state of Connecticut, the owner, believe it or not, is responsible. The building owner is responsible. No, we haven't gone this route. Maybe it's something we could start entertaining, but the owner of the house hires the roofer, does the job of the weekend, leaves town. We find out about it Monday. We knock on the homeowner's door or the building owner's door, and we haven't determined yet our next action. We could bring him to court. We could try to reach out to the roofer, of course. There are avenues for that. Again, investing the time to get there, Councilwoman, I don't know if it financially, if it's a win for us when those type of things occur, but it's not an easy battle. You know, we bring it up to the courts and they take it from there. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just very curious if we did have any way to get our money. But
yeah, I agree with you. Boy, I wish we could grab them by the collar and bring them in and take care of it. But the laws are what they are, and we have to follow the laws, yes.
If I may add a couple of points to that conversation, Councilwoman. First off, I wanted to bring to light that there was an amendment made to the code regarding the fee change back on, I think you adopted on February 18th, and this was the Article 81. I'm not sure though if the charter accepted it or not, which we would need to have happen before the building department could then levy these new fines. So that would be something that I would ask. That process was, the logistics was done. So that's one thing I would ask if that step was done, or what needs to be done to get that situated. The next thing I wanted to bring up regarding the fee was regarding these roofers that do that type of work. Realize this, that if that property owner goes to try to sell the house at some point, typically when the banks are involved, they're going to look for any permits that were issued, and when they don't see a roof permit like issued recently or whatever, they will then have to call us to then come and do a reinspection and then pull a permit at that point. and they're going to pay for a fee at that point for that roof. And so we do get our money maybe at a later date because they won't be able to sell that property or transfer that property without showing a permit. So a lot of times, not just with roofs, in many cases, our department goes out and either does inspections or close out inspections because they're trying to sell the property, and the property will not be transferred or closed until they address these permits. So we do, on a lot of cases, get those monies at a later date. So don't always think that we, lose out on that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, and I want to thank the unions and this administration, and also the leadership of Frank Gladwin. Last summer we initiated, and just to the point of, using some common sense sometimes, especially with builders. Last summer we initiated changing our hours to more of a flexible schedule, especially during the summer hours, of opening our offices earlier in the morning when a lot of these contractors started their day earlier in the summertime so that they could pull their permits and then go to work. And it actually worked out, I think, successfully for us to get them to come and pull their permits earlier. And we staggered our schedules with our department and our staff so that with an earlier shift and then a later shift, so that these early bird contractors could come in, pull their permits, and then go to work, because a lot of them want to start their day before 9 o'clock in the morning when we typically had open with City Hall hours. These contractors are starting sometimes 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were changing our office hours in the morning to accommodate that so they could pull their permits. So, and now with COVID-19, we're retraining our contractors to use other means of using either online to email their permits to us. Some of them are still using snail mail or they're dropping off. But I think if we could train them to do virtual type of permitting, it would make it better for us. Now, sometimes they don't give us all the information and it's a little more work for our staff to get that data in hand. But if we could be more efficient in that aspect, it could maybe make it a more effective process where we're not spending so much time at the counter, taking up valuable time when they could be out doing inspections. And that's really where we could produce more revenue for the city, obviously. And having that new position and having a certified position that has that certification to be able to not just do the property maintenance, but also be able to do the building permitting side of things and doing more inspections also to again, generate more revenue for the city. And that's really what the goal of it is, and running more efficiently. So just wanted to pass along those items.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions for Fred or his team? Councilman Donovan?
Yeah, first of all, Fred, Frank, Dave, thanks for coming out tonight to the meeting. Revenue, we need to bring in revenue, as we all know. And I know, going on about the fees was one point. What are we doing to bring in businesses? For example, the Armstrong building. We've had, I believe it was Stop and Shop was interested in it a bunch of years ago. Have we revisited them to see if they're still interested? Are we reaching out to grocery stores, chains, to bring in some grocery stores either in the plaza of Savin Avenue or over by ShopRite?
Yes, I did put in a request. I don't know if you saw my entire budget, but I did put a request in for the Armstrong building. And I think in my last February report about the Armstrong, I have a very aggressive approach for the Armstrong complex there. Currently, it is owned by Stop and Shop. So I want to be crystal clear on that. They own it and they purchased it when they did the development in the parking lot for their plaza. I've had recent talks with a former member of the Stop and Shop development team, because my vision for that complex is to make it a life science metro center. especially now with COVID-19. And if you look at what, just read the papers of what's happening in downtown New Haven. Win Stanley is doing a new development over the connector, $100 million project. We should be capitalizing on a very similar type of development, being that it's right next to the Metro train station there. Life science, that's what this New Haven County area is labeled and identified by the state of Connecticut Department of Community Development. This is what our sector is life science. And we should be capitalizing on that. And that's the future of this area. And we have a tremendous opportunity. And I feel that that's what the property should be developed as. Now, if we don't have the resources to possibly acquire the property and deed it over to the West Haven Economic Development Corporation for $1, let them be the lead and find the private partnerships to then develop that with the state, various departments and private capital, then I'm going to try to collaborate, hopefully, with this former real estate developer that worked with the Stop and Shop organization, and they're going to try to partner up with private entities. But in collaboration with the city, we are still going to have to assist them because it's a very complicated project. First off, the building itself holds, very critical items that are not going to make it an easy project, between the environmentals, the current state of the structure of the building, the location of it, are all going to be challenges of it. The age of the structure, but there are funds out there for these type of projects. And again, being right next to a $100 million train station is what's going to make it a desirable location. I promise you that. We have the zoning in place, which Dave's, the Planning and Zoning Commission did a wonderful job in putting together a TOD district to promote development. So that's what we have to focus on and try to capitalize on the marketing of. So that's really what we should focus on with regards to that. I've had discussions with the state of Connecticut most recently. I've also, but prior to COVID-19, tried to also do a collaborative effort with the Yale School of Architect to do a conceptual design so that I could have something tangible to show what the life science metro center could possibly look like. So then I could bring that out and show that to various groups. The actual dean of the School of Architect, his thesis, and he did a book on the Prudential Center in Boston, which that project was a very similar project where the Metro Center was designed around the Prudential Center. And that's how Boston was revitalized back in the 60s, based off of a very similar, much larger scale to what this project could be. So I think, it has a lot of similarities, which would, entail his interest. So I'm hoping that once we get past COVID, I could get their interest to possibly take it on and get their buy-in to work with us on that. So that's what I've been working on behind the scenes. But it's, again, very complicated, and it's going to be what I would then look to the council to work on is making it a special taxing district. That would hopefully make some gap filling that we would need for financing at some point. But there's going to be other things that we're going to need to do with this project to make it desirable. So
awesome. A couple other places. I mean, obviously, the conference center, that's still something still in the works for that, correct? You're still working on something with that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Not to be in specifics, but
sure.
All right. What about Sawmill Road now? We have that Valley Steakhouse, the old Valley Steakhouse, for those of you that probably don't remember it, but I remember it, eating there. That's been empty for decades. Stewart's is out. That's prime real estate right there. I mean, you're right on the highway. We going at that aggressively too, I'm hoping.
Again, as I reported in February, that's a private property, but I have spoken to the property owner, and they have what they're telling me, that they do have another operator that is close to taking over that property. So,
Stewardship.
correct.
What about the other facility? That's also private, or do we own that? Valley's Steakhouse area, the old Valley's.
You're saying the old Staples property?
Oh, Staples. Okay, yeah, that came.
Best Western?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in talks with a group that is going to be coming in. My understanding, for full disclosure, as Colonial Properties, who I work with, also in my other capacity. Years ago, I was the listing agent for that property back in 2016, and I had a hotel development deal for that. There was a zone change that was appealed, and then that developer left because of the appeal. And then the property was sitting idle for a couple of years. The current owner has another broker handling the marketing of that property. And there is interest on that property right now, and we're expecting to see something possibly come into our land use department with an application, and I don't know yet what that is, but I have been contacted by an attorney representing a group for that property. So I'm expecting something to come in, which we're excited to see.
All right, great. Listen, I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have a discussion because we're looking at a bunch of properties in the city that the city owns that we're going to talk with the council. I haven't talked to them about it either, but Fred, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Donovan. Does anyone else have any questions for Fred or his team? Councilwoman Johnston, please.
Councilwoman McGee had her hand up first.
Thank you, Councilwoman Johnston. Oh, sorry.
Councilwoman Johnston, please go ahead. It's when I see it, but thank you.
Got it. Hi, guys. Thanks for being here tonight. Most of the questions I had about the budget were already answered. So I just have a couple of clarifying questions, and then since we're not talking about the budget so much anymore, some sort of general questions. Mr. Masori, when you were talking about the Armstrong building, you kept using the phrase life science. Pardon my ignorance. Can you just clarify what you meant by that? Like what exactly that building would be? What your project is specifically around that term? I don't understand what that means.
Life science would be lab space. The focus would be in the medical genre, but it would also not just be lab space. It would be a living, work, and play on that site because there's various buildings there. Again, prior to COVID-19, I reached out to the State Economic Development Office to have their group analyze the structures to see what I would need to keep historical with the structures and what could possibly be removed for tax credits. My goal would be a mixture of some residential, some commercial, possibly even some parking for the train station, some amenities for the residential that's there. But again, a focus on the life science because the state of Connecticut has identified 3 sectors that this state should focus on going forward for the next 10 to 15 years. In the Hartford area, it's manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing with Pratt Whitney. In Stamford, it's the IT and financial districts. And in New Haven, it's in the life science sector. So we, as in West Haven, obviously New Haven is spending $600 million by, say, Wright Fields and Yale, and now they're putting up another structure of $100 million in downtown. West Haven needs to collaborate with Yale Hospital and Yale School, the University of New Haven, and focus on the life science sector and take advantage of, again, the train station so that this 7-acre site gets redeveloped into that, being in a transit-oriented development plan. Once you start that, you will see the other properties that surround it also get to a higher and better use than what you see now. The north side of the train tracks you would see get redeveloped instead of just being a warehouse building, you would see that get redeveloped into a very similar use. And then on the west side of the Sawmill Road, you would see those properties start getting redeveloped. We're doing a new bike and pedestrian linkage from the train station to the Yale West campus. I think some of you went to the public session that our engineering department did over the fall and winter. And we're just finishing up the final design of that, which the construction will happen soon thereafter. And that'll be the rest of Railroad Avenue and Frontage Road going all the way to Yale West. And again, you'll see some hopefully redevelopment of some of those sites that are along that corridor. But we do have some good industries there. So that's what life science, hopefully I answered your question, but that's what you'll see. And then there's also some opportunities on Hood Terrace that are right now just warehouse properties, but I think there's a higher and better use of those properties that could be developed into a higher scale development that would be much better utilized being right next to a $100 million train station.
Is that all, Councilwoman Johnston? You follow up?
That's really helpful. I just had one other question. I was wondering if you could give us an update, if you had any, on the Haven and the property on the corner of Union and Smith that continues to be a eyesore in a residential neighborhood.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll start with Union and Smith. That's the last use that was there was a convalescent home. A developer purchased that, realized the problem with that property, it's a non-conforming parcel. And basically it's the best it could be is a 3-family house. So it's an oversized 3-family house. Extensively an oversized 3-family house. So the developer that purchased it now has plans with our building department, and they're going to be renovating it to make it a 3-family house. So that's what's underway right now. So they've started cleaning up the property, and our building department right now is reviewing the plans to do the modifications for that. The Havens, right now we have it's been public, but April 27th, next Monday, we will be having the road closure on Water Street. The demolition contractor will start the abatement soon thereafter of the properties, the commercial properties. And then they'll start the permitting to do the clearing of those properties soon thereafter for the next phase of that project. So that's where we're at with that project. So it's exciting times.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman McGee?
I have a question about Gold Medal Bakery that I believe is supposed to be at Cumberland Farms. Are there any updates on what that looks like right now?
I'm gonna defer that. Again, I'm gonna just defer that to Dave Colleen, since again, in my other capacity as a realtor, I'm the listing agent on that property for full disclosure, being with Colonial Properties. So I'm going to disclose that and defer to Dave Colleen, our assistant planner. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councilman. The property was presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals sometime in the fall for approval of a couple of variances that were required. Those variances were approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals, but then some of the neighbors actually appealed that decision. So the variance is still approved, but it's on hold for review by the courts. In the meantime, I did recently hear from the attorney representing Cumberland Farms, and they've indicated they would like to try to proceed with site plan approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission regardless. In other words, they know that they need to complete the review with the courts on the variance application, but they'd like to proceed with the rest of the application. And normally that takes longer to put together because the requirements for the planning and zoning submission is more detailed than the Zoning Board of Appeals. But we do believe that's still on track.
I just have a follow-up question. As far as the concern of the residents, what was their concern? Was it construction or that the building of the property would affect theirs? Just for clarification.
Sure. I wasn't actually at the specific meeting that was held. I know that one of the variances that was required had to do with location of an automotive related business, a gas station within 100 feet of a residential zone. It's in a way an odd regulation because if you look at the length of Boston Post Road, there are very few parcels that aren't within 100 feet of a residential zone. We believe that some of the businesses along the street may have collaborated with the neighbors to file the appeals, so that even though it may have been in the names of some of the residents, we do believe that some of the other businesses in the area, coffee shops and other gas stations, may have participated in that. Don't know it for sure, but that's kind of the rumor. So, I mean, the concerns are valid in terms of its proximity to a residential zone, but the applicant also kind of went out of their way with the design to buffer the residential area. They kept their gas tanks, their pumps, the station, the shop itself removed from the residential area and tried to keep all of the traffic coming in from the Boston Post Road side.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman McGee. Does anyone else have any questions for the first time around? Barry, you went already, right? Just 1 second, I'm sorry. Does anyone else have any questions? Chairman?
Thank you, Councilwoman Hosky. First off, Frank Gladwin, if you're still on the call in Florida, I don't know, they haven't eased up any restrictions, so there's probably not much else to do right now. But listen, Frank, I just want to tell you from all the years that I've worked with you, from I think I was probably a patrolman all the way through to now, you've been nothing more of a gentleman than anyone that I know. Your work ethic is beyond reproach, and I would just think maybe you want to reconsider your pending retirement and push it out a little while longer. But I appreciate all that you do and have done for the city. David, I want to thank you for the work that you do, especially with the stuff that I'm involved with the POCD and the work with the Allentown Steering Committee. I think you're helping us guide and making some great progress, specifically in the Allentown area. So thank you for that. Fred, I just want to talk a minute. We've talked about building, we've talked about grants, a little bit about development, but when we started our budget process, when the new council got seated, the finance director came in front of us and had a slide deck of all the basically financing 101 for us to flip through. And one of his pages at the very end said, key to a stabilized or reduced mill rate is, and then in big letters says economic development. So, you know, you caught a tail end of our meeting right? And you've been around a long time. You know the trials and tribulations of West Haven and taxes and maybe poor financial decisions historically. And really, the only thing that's going to get us out of where we're going without reaching into the taxpayer's pocket over and over again is development. And I appreciate you looking mid to long term, talking about Armstrong and a couple other those projects. Is there something that you could share to us that is short term that you're involved with bringing, business to the city regarding where it would hit the FY21 budget to give us a little bit of relief?
Well, I wish I could tell you that there is a silver bullet to do something that quick. And there isn't. Economic development takes time. And the one thing I could tell you that we are doing is to try to run a department that's very stable, consistent, with a vision, and just keep implementing what is the message. It's a very difficult town and city to do economic development in. When we do have some good projects, it's typically in somebody's backyard. And what you think is a project that should get developed, it usually gets resistance, and in many cases, it could possibly get appealed. We just had a project that most recently was what I felt a project that was good for the city. Unfortunately, it had some resistance from the surrounding neighbors, and it got denied. And it would have brought revenue to the city immediately, and it would have possibly helped on the bottom line of the taxes and the mill rate. But unfortunately, it got denied, and we're not seeing that right now. So all I could tell you is that I think we're putting things in place for the future, for smart decisions to happen. And the other thing that we're working on is getting projects that have been stagnant for years to the point where they're moving in the right direction for other developers to consider West Haven and to support development and bringing their projects to the city. So even though I gave you a long answer, and it may not be something that gives you something immediate, I think we're positioning the city in a positive light. Realize we don't have a lot of land. We don't have raw land to develop. And people have to realize that. I wish I could put a chart and show you if I had 5 projects like, let's just say 600 Derby Avenue, and I put them around. I'm not sure that would change the mill rate for what we have, the exposure of the bond and debt service that's out there. And people have to realize that, unfortunately. But we can still make a quality of life improvement and continue to try to enhance the overall development for the city and move things in the right direction and put planning guides in place and zoning regulations in place to promote future development to come to the city. That will make it a better community to live, work, and play in. And that's what we're doing. I also think our office is doing an emphasis on our natural resources, which we've never done before. Currently, I have an RFQ that's being prepared and being reviewed by the mayor's office to look at the area around Morris Park. I think that's a jewel for the city that we've never really focused in on. People have mentioned Beach Street and the lack that the city's not focused on. I know that we're looking at raising the road there, which is wonderful. But, the natural resource of the water course that's there and the bird sanctuary that goes out on Sandy Point, that's a jewel that we haven't really tapped into. And I think there's an opportunity there that if we do the correct things with that and promote that in the proper manner, that area could be developed properly and bring in development that would then enhance all the properties in that area, especially with what's going on with the Haven now that project's getting started. That you're going to see some great investment happening in that corridor. which a lot of people now think that it's derelict and it's run down. And I understand the frustration for the many years that the project's been stagnant. But, you know, when you have redevelopment, it takes time. And I understand everybody's frustration. We all want to see things happen there. But there is a plan, there's a vision, and we're working with the proper people and the developers to move these things along, and we're going to get there. But again, right now we're focusing our attention on the natural resources there. We're going to do an assessment and an analysis of what's there, and hopefully we could open up some of those vistas that are there to take advantage of looking at what's there. People drive by, and you know, we don't even know. You know, the beauty that sits there. Other communities would die to take advantage of those natural resources, and that's where the public investment should be in. And you talk about the grants writer, that's where we go get funding for those type of projects. And you know, I have a vision that if you're familiar with, you know, Eisenhower Park in Milford, I think that we could reassess what's going on at Morris Park into a multi-generational park that's being utilized much better than what's there now. I mean, I know we have softball and we have some baseball fields there, but you know, I don't think it's being used to its highest use is all those the acreage that's there. So I want to do an analysis of what those fields are, maybe reposition some of those assets that are there, move the skate park off of the water, the street there, and reposition it off and put it in the back somewhere possibly. Take advantage of what's there, clean all that evasive growth that's along the water course there, and open it up, put some walking paths that are there, and again, take advantage of what's across the street with the sandy point, and open up that natural resource. Fix up those boardwalks that are on that side of the shoreline, because they're decrepit, they look horrible, and really make that a beautiful area so people that could congregate and really take advantage of that. And then you'll see those private properties that are sitting there idle get developed. And with the beach raising and the road, you know, Beach Street raising, that all goes hand in hand. But I'll tell you right now, that's not going to happen in a year. You know, and I'd be, you know, lying to you if I said I could get it done in a year. I need time for those things. You know?
I don't disagree with your overall concept. I have a different vision. I think you're right that you need to open up those vistas, and I think most communities would die for the stretch of public beach that we have. And when I look at Beach Street, I recognize that some of those are private developers, and there's only so much you could do with private developers. But we have opportunities to kind of start the conversation with some public property that we have, right? So I personally don't think that Morris Park, that's the best use of that piece of property. I do think that we should have parks. I do think we should have ball fields. I do think that we should have a skate park. I'm not convinced we need to have those things immediately on the shorefront. I think that's a wonderful economic development opportunity piece of property there. That could be the catalyst to having the old Debonair Motel and having some of the Chicks property, and all those come together and have some really beneficial economic private development. So sometimes I think that we wait for privates for too long, and we should take the initiative. And I think that piece of property is the initiative that we should take. But that's my comment. That's my thoughts. And you know, I appreciate the fact that I know you're working hard at it. It's just that, you know, day in and day out, we're looking for a change and be able to turn the ship around. And I think this administration has worked very hard to do that. I just think that, again, you know, we only have a few places that we could go for revenue, and we're just trying to get every little corner and crack that we can. And I think that piece of property could really be a catalyst. So,
well, I don't. Thank you. And I don't disagree with any of that, but if you look at my budget or the budget historically by this department, even prior to me being here, typically this budget is just a budget for our, a very small amount is given to us for our salaries. It's typically not a large amount that is for doing projects like, that. It's very difficult.
I'm losing the connection a little bit. I don't see anybody anymore except you, Councilman Hosky. Can you still hear me?
Yes,
All right.
I can.
Fred, I just heard you say that could you repeat what you said about the department and that I didn't hear what you said, you cut out.
No, I just think in general, I mean, I just appreciate your comments, but I think historically the city, just in general, I mean, taking aside, just in general, the planning and development budget is typically one of the smaller budgets that the city has, but it's always emphasized, and that's not just in West Haven, in many communities, but it's ironic that it's emphasized as economic development is so important to the community. Obviously, it is. But when we talk about giving us the funding to try to really make a difference in a community, you need a budget to do those type of things. You need staffing and you need a budget and really to do change that we all talk about. And it's very difficult when we're trying to do things without the resources to be able to do the things that we all want to see there. So like I said, right now I'm trying to do an analysis of that land that we're just talking about, Morris Park. I want to do an analysis to see what I have there, and then figure out what's the highest and best use of that land. And I hope I can do that in the next year or so,
So, I mean, I'm looking at the budget that we have in front of us. Have you requested monies for assistance with economic development in your budget that you didn't get?
Yes.
Frank, are you still on the?
Is that?
I'm here, but I don't believe that's the case.
What
I'd
page, Fred?
like to know the
What would
page
it be
as well.
referring to?
No, I believe what Fred is saying is that maybe he said, I don't think it's this budget. I think maybe he submitted to the city and this is the mayor's recommended budget. So I'm asking Frank if there's any requests that Fred has made that didn't make it to this budget. That's what I'm interested in.
Capital, I think.
I'm sorry, capital? Yeah, capital, Fred, you wanted what? $17 million for Armstrong? That never made it.
Yeah, that's for Beach Street. I wanted 40, 70.
I think Armstrong was the only thing that I took out. We just can't afford that kind of money.
$70,000 for Beach Street corridor was requested. And that was, that was requested last year and this year.
I'll have to go back.
I don't want to belabor the.
Yeah.
I just,
Okay.
Fred, if you need resources to do that, I mean, again, I'm not aware of that.
And again, some of the difficulties we have are regulatory too, just so everybody realizes that, a lot of these properties that we all want to see developed are in flood zones. So we also have to be cognizant of that. And part of what we need to do is a resiliency plan. We have strategies in place. We have a harbor commission that wants to see these initiatives be done. We have a master plan that we need to follow. Again, these are works through Dave Pauline. Dave, if you want to comment on some of this.
Yes, I mean, I think what you're saying is basically that we were trying to put together a budget for having some planning documents developed for those areas. And what we've done is gone back and tried to work on a request for qualification that instead relies on the existing budget. I think there's 15,000 in the current budget and 15,000 in the proposed budget. And what we're trying to do is cobble those together to hire a consultant that can help us begin working on some of that visioning. Kind of also in the background is the fact that we were able to successfully obtain a commitment from the Regional Planning Commission last year, the Southern Connecticut Regional Council of Governments, to approve a $50,000 bicycle and pedestrian plan. So that has been approved, and we expect once the COVID situation passed, that program will begin, and that will help us, I think, focus on some connections throughout the city that will be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point. I appreciate that. You know, again, I think it's important to open up the vistas. It's important to identify those opportunities with the regional planning officials, and I recognize it's in a floodplain. My only point is that we have a beautiful piece of property there that is right on the waterfront that maybe we could leverage to get public-private partnership with some of those other properties that haven't had any movement to begin to work together to develop that area. That's my only comment. And again, I don't want to belabor the point. It's getting late. There's other people that want to talk. But thank you, Councilwoman Hosky.
I want to belabor the point. David, can I ask you, you said this consultant that you were looking to hire, this is the first I'm hearing of it. I'm not sure if any of the other council has heard of it. How is the consultant going to cost?
Well, the original proposal we put in that Fred was talking about was for $70,000 to do the entire study. When that money wasn't appropriated, we chose to try to work on an alternative approach. If you look at the budget before you for the planning and development, there's a line item in there for
what page? I'm sorry.
Okay, let's see. I'm having trouble pulling it up. I'm sorry too. Do you have the page number there, Fred?
If it's planning and development, it would be page 44.
Thank you.
The building department is page 45.
Okay, hold on.
Economic development consultant?
Hold on. Sorry, I had it up here and it dropped off my screen.
Let me just be clear. These requests started my first year when I was hired. I put them in my capital budget. When I first was hired, because I came in that February, you know, I needed to get established that I did not really put a budget in, and I just kind of, you know, the first budget really wasn't fair, but the next year was my first real budget. I put a request in the capital budget for Beach Street, to do a study for that. I did it for the conference center. You know, I did put requests in the capital budget because I can't, you know, that's where I'm told to put it in, not into my operating budget, because you know, it would just not.
Part of what you said is your payroll and the people you have on your payroll. And that's why I think, Chairman, and I don't mean to speak for you, but I was thinking, I don't remember in your budgets, at least when I've been sitting on the council, and I could be wrong, that you were requesting any additional headcount to support economic development. And that maybe that's not what you were intending on saying, but that is how I interpreted your words, is that because we didn't give you additional payroll or additional, people to do, that is what has made our economic development stagnant and why it's slow. But if you're saying that you need additional headcount to get our economic development up and running to a higher capacity, well, that is why we're here. Feel free to tell us exactly what it is you're requesting so that we can better serve you in your job of getting us more economic development, because that's kind of what I thought I heard you say. But can you tell me about the consultant, Dave? I'm interested about that. What where are you wanting me to look?
If you go onto the planning and development budget, come down to the engineering cost plan and development, 15,000. That's an amount, as Fred says, that has been in the budget a while, and it's been available mainly for the department to bring in consultants to help with different projects. So that 15,000 is what we're looking at to try to begin this study. We're trying to do it as a request for qualifications and putting it out so that the consultant realizes they're not getting the total amount right away. We're trying to utilize what we have available and then stretch it out over a couple of years or so.
Right. And so I guess part of my struggle is the fact that we're in the fourth quarter almost. Yep, we're in the fourth quarter of fiscal 2020. There are line items where, not everybody, there could be additional monies out there. There's money that we have that line items in other departments that have not been used. And nobody has come before us requesting, hey, City Council, we're looking for $15,000. We want to hire this consultant to do this, that, and the other thing. We haven't heard that. I've been the finance chair, I don't know, maybe 5 months now, and maybe about 2 weeks. And nobody has said, we could use this to help us. You think you can find some money for us? You think you can do this? Because I'm going to tell you, we found money. The police department came and said they wanted handheld devices. Could we put them in the budget for next year? And I said, let's put the brakes on it. We're going to get you that money this year. We're doing the same thing with the cameras. I'm on top of Fred this last couple of days to say between Chairman Quagliani found, looking for money and saying that there's money. The snow removal fund, it's not a whole lot of money, but somebody should want that money. And if the West Haven Police Department doesn't want to ask for that money to get their cameras fixed, well, then planning and development should show up and ask for $25,000 to hire a consultant. I will not sit here in this meeting and hear that we somehow have not supported you guys in your run for economic development. If you want a consultant, then let's get you a consultant. You have till June 30th. Tell us how much money it's going to cost. Come before us, ask us to transfer it to your line item, and let's get you a consultant. I just don't want to hear year after year after year, we weren't able to do something because the city council didn't properly fund you. Sounds good to me.
Okay. So maybe I should give you.
I'm sorry. Who's talking? It's. Let me mute.
I apologize. Maybe I should then say it differently then. For the last 2 years, I put a request in the capital budget for projects, for planning documents that would address some of the questions that have been raised to my department, instead of putting it in my operating budget. But I also was following a zero budget increase to my operating budget. So that's maybe some of the confusion. So.
No, and I can understand that, but there's some money out there, and if we could do something between now and June, help you guys get the ball rolling. I just don't want to go into 2021 hearing that it can't happen, because let me tell you, I live in the Center District, and it's depressing. I So if you haven't asked and if there's something you want, then you guys got to take the initiative and come before us and make the ask. There is money out there. There might be $75,000 that I don't plan on voting it to go where it is initially supposed to be going. So I'm just gonna, no one seems to be hearing me when I say that. Maybe you guys will listen.
What I will
have another question.
What I will do is I will forward you my capital budget request so that you can see what I submitted with the narrative so that it's clear to what it was and it'll make sense. And I'll send that to you in the morning.
Okay, let's be very clear, though. Capital budgeting cannot include consultants. That is an operating cost.
Okay.
It has to be, thank you, Frank, yeah. It has to be something else. If there's something that you wanted to do this year that we didn't fund you for, like a consultant that was going to be $15,000, and you're able to do it now and you get the price for it and you know that how much that's going to be, then you can come before us and request it. I can't promise you that we're going to do, you know, what we can do, but I can tell you the answer is no, because you haven't asked. You can't say, well, the city council, we haven't gotten it yet. Well, you got to step to the plate and ask, you know, can you come up with this money? It's the fourth quarter. Is there any money anywhere that might be able to be reallocated to fund this line item that we didn't get this year? But it's like Frank said, it's not the capital stuff. It's this consultant that I think, David, we were kind of referring to. But I don't want to belabor this saying that if there are things, then right now.
But just so you're clear, I want you to understand where we are with the consultant that Dave's being mentioned. What we did to compensate for the consultant was we took money that was in my budget and we put an RFQ together, and it's being reviewed now by the mayor's office, and we're looking hopefully favorable to be able to send that out, that I believe we'll be able to get it done and utilize before the end of this fiscal year. So I think we'll be all set for that.
So then you're saying you don't need any funding, you're all good. Great. I have another question. In regards to development, this is my question. Councilman Donovan is in charge of lands and public spaces. I'm probably butchering the committee that he's in charge of, but I have been anxiously waiting for him to schedule this meeting because we are looking to go through property that's owned by the city and how we might be able to sell that, or what could we put up for sale. And part of what I was thinking, and you can tell me if I'm wrong because you have a lot of experience in this, Fred, is that I'm thinking that when you look at a property and you're going to sell it, you kind of look at the development around it. And case in point, we look at this property we have in Allentown and we want to sell it. And you're thinking all that development that's over there. I mean, imagine if we have a property in that location, you would just think that naturally the value of it would increase drastically because of all that development, because of the forest and the wood. I don't know the names. I'm like at a brain, whatever. All those, that it would just naturally increase its value. So wouldn't it behoove us to actually try to look at that and say, okay, these properties that the city owns over near the Haven, what could we sell? What should Gary be looking at, or what, when he has his meeting, which I hope is going to be soon, what property should we be looking at in that area to say, it might be a good idea to try to sell this because the Haven's going to be being built, that property is going to be worth something. Over in Allentown, I don't know how many properties we own near the Atwood and something, the other name. Would it behoove us to try to sell them because they're going to be worth so much more? I would imagine property values go up when there's development. What is your thought on that? And how do we maximize that? How do we,
do that?
I think we should first just get an inventory of what we have. And then that would be the first step. You want to find out what we have. So I would take an inventory of the properties first. And go from there.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Councilwoman Hamilton?
I know it's late, so I will be brief. First, I want to say, Mr. Gladwin, I am glad that you're in Florida. You deserve it. And when you leave, you're just irreplaceable. I like your style and your approach. And what would this meeting be without me saying Family Dollar?
Very kind of you. Thank you. And West Haven is always in my heart, and I'll be back in May. Thank you.
Great. So I want to thank you and Fred and whoever else was involved. I'm getting 0 calls for Family Dollar. They removed the light, that dangerous light pole. It's removed, and that dumpster that was in the front is removed, and there's a gate. I don't know how long it will last, but their dumpster is now gated. So I just want to say thank you for that. Fred, I want to know, on Route 34, where the hospital has built, their first building, are they looking to develop anything more on that property? Do you know?
I'm sure there's still 113 acres total left. Not all of it is developable, but we haven't heard anything more yet, but I'm sure there's more to come.
Okay. Well, again, and Dave, I can't leave you out, David. Thank you. As Chairman Quagliani said, thank you for all that you do for the Allentown Steering Committee. You put in hours, and Allentown appreciates that. Thank you. That's all, Councilman Husky. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hamilton. Does anyone else have any questions for Fred and his team? Councilman Cohen? You muted, Barry. You muted.
I bet you I sounded the best I ever did, huh? But thank you. I'll make this as quick as I can. I know it's getting late. One question I think is for Frank. Frank, maybe I just wasn't able to understand one thing, and if this gets to be too granular, I will give you a call tomorrow. But if you take a look at your deck, Frank, page 9 of your deck, you show that the planning and development, that the proposed full year 2001 was like $1,055,000. And I'm trying to compare some of the expenses with the actual mayor's plan, which is 939. Was there something that was taken out from when you did it? Because I'm still getting the 87,000 differential. If it's, I don't want to get, I just want to make sure I got the right numbers I'm working with here.
Yeah, I don't know where the 87, I don't know where the 87 is coming from. I know the only thing that we really did take out were some seasonal people that were requested for
Okay, so
21,000.
Okay, so if I subtract those from there, that's it, because usually your deck has been spot on with the mayor's presentation. That's why with the mayor's proposed budget. So I was kind of at a loss because the mayor's budget is 939,000, and I've been trying to deduct from your 1,055,000. But don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. I don't want to.
I'll double check for you, sir.
I appreciate it. The other question I have is for Fred. Fred, in your budget, you have an advertising line for $35,000. And I just wanted to know, because I go to I'm the liaison, as you know, to the Economic Development Commission. Is any of that money going to be used for any? I know that they have great plans, very creative people, from website to flags and all types of stuff. What is that $35,000 for, or do they not have any money to do what they need to do? It's just a question.
Sure. I wish it was for what the advertising that you would think it's for. That line item is for advertising of our legal ads only. for when an application comes into our land use departments, that is utilized for when you see the ad go in saying that there's going to be a planning and zoning commission meeting for ABC Industries at 123 Main Street for this, this use or inland wetlands. That's what that
Right.
advertisement is. We have,
Because the reason,
yeah,
sorry. The reason why I asked the question is the commissions are a great group of people that the mayor has put together, and I congratulate her on this. But if their mission, or one of their major missions is to market, to help you market East Haven, if you will, and I'll take this offline later on, that there doesn't seem to be, maybe there is, and I haven't caught it, how they're going to be budgeted, or maybe they have to, maybe they're just not budgeted, but I assume they'd be budgeted through your office. Is that incorrect?
I have had some discussions with the chairperson. Right now, they do not have a budget. Currently, they are going to try to do some fundraising from what they've indicated, depending on what their initiatives that they decide to go forward on. And depending on how they go forward and what their budget is, we'll see how the future is and what I can do to assist them.
Okay, yeah, because as you know, I've been at the meeting. You know what, Fred, once we get back together and so forth, and once the commission has another meeting, which I expect to attend like the others, I may circle back with you separately on that, and if necessary, talk to the mayor, talk to the council. That's all I had. I just wanted to, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Barry. Anyone else have any questions for Fred or his team?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not just to clarify that Fred did actually submit a request for $45,000 to study ongoing engineering issues for the floodplain, the 100-year flood zone, as well as $70,000 for the Beach Street corridor. Those are tagged for fiscal 22 in the capital non-recurring, because capital non-recurring does actually impact the mill rate in that year. I took it upon myself to prioritize the software that was needed, that is beyond end of life in both the police and City Hall. That got prioritized to fiscal 21 so that operations could keep going. But Fred did in fact request those funds that are targeted for fiscal 22.
Thank you. Anyone else have any follow-up? Well, Fred and team, Dave and Frank, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. As always, please stay safe, wash your hands, and thank you for what you do for the city. You are done for this evening, council members. We are going to recess. It is 9:14. And I will see everybody bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.